There's an old American system, it's called free enterprise. We have a tendency to forget when the do-gooders start to rise. When the dollar gets weak and prices are high and they give us their socialist salve. If the government can give you all you want, it can take everything you have.
I'm Mike Prickett. The founding fathers of the new Republic of the United States of America were inspired by a Christian belief in a divine creator. With this belief, they were very mindful of the need for individual freedom to be a part of their creation of a constitutional government that would assure the preservation of individual rights and responsibilities. They realized that in order for people to grow and to improve themselves and to improve the new republic, they must have no restrictions on free speech, religion, the freedom to contract among each other for commerce and trade, nor on the right to arm themselves against the threat of tyranny and despotism. They did their best to be as thorough as possible in outlining these rights by creating a document that outlined these essential provisions. So in the process of breaking away from the tyranny of the King of England, they published a Declaration of Independence in 1776 that described as best they could, and as far as they could see at the time, the reasons why such a republic with the laws and a constitution to assure such freedoms was needed as a precursor to the constitutional government they were intending to create, and did so in 1789 with the passing of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that was added to it in 1792. The Declaration of Independence was a declaration of separation. In other words, it was a cessation from English rule and despotism. In this new age of information, the people are far better informed than they were in the 18th and 19th centuries. Money has been the root of all evil for many generations. The discovery and development of an alternative currency that is apart from institutional implementation is a refreshing departure from trusting a fiat money system that is based on debt and credit and managed by natural, greedy individuals who vacuum the wealth away from poor and hardworking citizens to themselves. Fiat money doesn't trickle down, it's vacuumed up. With the discovery of the internet and cyberspace, the world has stood in need of an additional, new Declaration of Independence, not as a revision of the first, but in addition to it. Not just for the citizens of the United States, but for free and responsible citizens in every country in the world. To serve the need for the independence of people worldwide, therefore, in opposition to any attempt to establish bank, institutional, or government-controlled digital currencies, or CBDC, I propose this Declaration of Financial Independence in support, and as a strengthening of the original American version, to further define the God-given freedom and agency of individuals everywhere. Therefore, I give you this Declaration of Financial Independence, a worldwide declaration of financial independence. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for people to dissolve the financial bands which have connected them with banks, fund managers, and governments, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to a separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments and banks are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the citizens, that whenever any form of finance becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the citizens to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new independent financial self-custody, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments and central banks, long established, should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such bondage and to provide a new guard for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of the people of the world, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their formal systems. The history of central fiat banking is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the people. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. They have refused assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. They have, by the use of fiat money created out of nothing, enslaved countries around the world to unsustainable debt, thereby usurping powers created by themselves in opposition to the unalienable rights of citizens. They have refused to respect laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of individual liberty, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. They have called together bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing the people into compliance with their measures. They have refused for a long time to cause their chosen and corrupted political candidates, bought by exorbitant amounts of fiat money created out of nothing, and political blackmail, to be elected, whereby the financial powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the countries remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. They have endeavored by a system of debt to distribute or withhold the monies of the countries of the world. For that purpose, obstructing the laws of personal agency and responsibility, discouraging personal stewardship, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of financial instruments of fiat currency and its distribution. They have obstructed the administration of fair and equitable administration by a system of worldwide stakeholder governments whose powers are limited in corporate fashion by the monetary value of their individual stakes. They have coerced judges to become dependent on their will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries and stipends. They have erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. They have funded among us in times of war and peace the manufacture of armaments, standing armies on both sides without the consent of the people. They have affected to render corrupt governors the martial law, independent of and superior to the civil power of local governments and the common law. They have combined with each other to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our unalienable and God-given rights, and unacknowledged by our laws and agency, giving their assent to their acts of pretended governance and control. For funding and establishing large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them from punishment for any property destruction or murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of all countries, for controlling our trade with all parts of the world, for causing the imposition of taxes in many forms on us without our consent, for abolishing any free system of common laws in every country in the world, establishing arbitrary governments and enlarging boundaries so as to render them at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule to others, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. They have usurped the powers of governments around the world by declaring them subject to debt, their fiat financial provision and protection, and waging war against any who resist. They have promoted wars, plundered our countries, ravished our governments, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of innocent people. They have promoted and funded wars between countries to get gain, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy, scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the heads of any civilized nation. They have funded mercenaries, constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive to bear arms against their brethren, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. They have excited domestic insurrections amongst us by an unsustainable Ponzi scheme, and have endeavored to bring on by inflation an unserviceable debt, inflicting the inhabitants of our countries with merciless enslavement, starvation, and economic sanctions rendered by despotic authoritarian control in the name of personal protection and safety, causing the financial destruction of families, businesses, and personal property. Their own rule of welfare is an undistinguished destruction of the welfare of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. Any institution whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler or controller of the currency of a free people, their welfare, or their personal finances. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their institutions to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our unalienable God-given rights. We have appealed to their justice and magnanimity. We have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessary, which denounces our separation, and hold them, as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war and despotism, in peace and fair dealing friends. We therefore, in general defense, appealing to the supreme judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in accordance with his holy standard, solemnly and peacefully publish and declare that all people ought to be free and independent property owners and custodians of their own wealth and welfare, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the central banks, and that all compulsory connection between them and the centrally controlled financial institutions are and ought to be freely and independently dissolved, and that as free and independent citizens, they have full power to trade independently, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent citizens may of right do, separate from the reliance upon or manipulation by central banks and or governments and institutions. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now, you don't need to sign this declaration as was done in times past. All you have to do is buy as much Bitcoin as you can, as often as you can, regardless of the current price in dollars, and whether you can afford it or not, and hold on to it aside from centralized control in preparation for the day that merchants worldwide will accept it in trade for their goods and services. Babylon is falling. Don't you fall with it. For comments or suggestions, please register and message me on my website, dimeboxer.com. My email address is ike@dimeboxer.com. On request, I will send you a free copy of this new declaration. I also want to hear your comments and questions. I'm Ike Pickett. Thanks for your patience for listening to this declaration in its entirety. I'll see you again soon. In the meantime, be as righteous as you know how to be, and sleep peacefully tonight, knowing that your savings are in your own custody.